If you stand very still inside a quiet Indian home at night, you can sometimes hear your life cracking. Not loudly, not violently, but with a soft, sharp sound, the kind you only recognize when it's already too late. My name is Diya Sharma, 35 years old, born in Jaipur, raised to believe that marriage is a sacred promise and that love, if nurtured with patience, eventually becomes a shelter. But in my house, silence had become the only thing that stayed with me. People often said I was lucky. A good job in a pharmaceutical company, a neat little home in Mansarovar, and a husband, Raghav Singh, who looked like every woman's dream, polished, confident, respected, always smelling faintly of expensive cologne. To outsiders, he was the perfect Indian gentleman. To me, he was a season that never changed, cold, distant, unreadable. And on the night my world finally broke open, destiny was supposed to be celebrating with us. It was our 10th wedding anniversary. It was his birthday. A double milestone, a day I believed would remind us who we once were. I left work early, battled through Jaipur's evening traffic, picked up his favorite Sula red wine, collected a custom cake from the halwai near Raj Mandir, white frosting, gold lettering, simple but full of meaning. I decorated the terrace with warm lights, laid out the silver set my mother gave me, and cooked lal mas just the way he loved it. By 7, everything was ready. By 8, the candles flickered softly. By 9, I sent him a message. I'm waiting. There was no reply. At 9:30, I called. 5 rings, then voicemail. At 10:48, a single email lit up my screen. Busy with the client. Won't make it tonight. No apology. No acknowledgement. Not even a happy anniversary. The candles had burned to stubs. The food had gone cold. And in that stillness, something inside me shifted so sharply I could feel the crack echo through my chest. That was the night everything began. The morning after that silent anniversary felt strangely heavy, as if the walls of our home were holding a secret they weren't ready to share. I woke up before sunrise, still wearing the same red sari, now wrinkled and smelling faintly of extinguished candles. My eyes burned, not from crying, but from the ache of questions that refused to settle. Raghav hadn't come home at all. I made tea the way I always did, 2 spoons of sugar for him, none for me. Out of habit, I placed both cups on the table. One stayed untouched, slowly losing its warmth, mirroring the way my marriage had cooled over the years. At work, I tried to bury myself in numbers, spreadsheets, invoices, anything that didn't require me to feel. But the silence from Raghav's side kept growing louder. No message, no call, not even a missed notification. It was as though I had simply stepped out of his world without warning, or perhaps he had stepped out of mine long before this day. By noon, uneasiness pushed me toward a decision. I dialed the reception of the real estate firm where Raghav worked. My voice trembled slightly as I said his name. The receptionist hesitated. I could hear papers shuffling, a nervous clearing of the throat. Ma'am, Mr. Raghav resigned 4 days ago. For a moment, my heart stopped. The corridor around me blurred. I asked her to repeat it, hoping I had misheard. But no, her voice was firm, apologetic, final. He had left the job 4 days ago, and I had no idea. I walked out of the office, the Jaipur heat hitting my face like a slap. Every memory of the past few weeks started returning in fast, jumbled flashes. The late nights, the vague excuses, the disappearing weekends, the untouched meals, the cold glances. He hadn't drifted away from me. He had already moved on. I was just the last person to realize it. I drove home as if chasing a truth I didn't want to face. The moment I unlocked the door, I knew something was wrong. The house felt hollow, like someone had pulled its soul out and left only walls behind. My eyes moved to the shoe rack. The second row, usually filled with his polished brown leather shoes, was empty. I whispered his name once, twice. Silence answered. I pushed open the bedroom door, and there he was standing beside an open suitcase, clothes scattered around like he was packing in a hurry, or perhaps he had been planning this for days. He looked up at me briefly. No guilt, no warmth, no surprise, just a detached, distant acknowledgement. "You're home," he said, as if it were an inconvenience. In that moment, I realized the truth. I had been too afraid to see. Whatever this marriage once was, it had already ended. I was only now arriving at the funeral. For a moment, neither of us moved. The ticking of the ceiling fan sounded louder than my own heartbeat. Raghav folded another shirt, slid it into the suitcase, and zipped the pocket with a calmness that felt cruel. I stepped forward, my voice barely steady. "Where are you going?" His answer came like a blow delivered without hesitation. "Ahmedabad. I've accepted a new position there. I start next week." I stared at him. "You quit your job? You're leaving the city? And you didn't think I deserved to know?" He didn't look up. There was nothing to discuss. Nothing to discuss. 10 years of marriage reduced to 4 words. My hands trembled as I reached for the edge of the suitcase. "Raghav, what is happening to us?" He finally met my eyes, but the warmth I had once known was gone. His expression was flat, transactional, as if I were a tenant whose lease was ending. "I've been unhappy for a long time," he said. "You work too much. You barely keep the house in order. You don't make time for me. And, frankly, you're not the wife I need anymore." The room spun. "I work because we both have bills to pay. I cook for you, clean for you, support you. When have you ever asked what I need?" He scoffed, shutting the suitcase. "That's your choice, Diya. I shouldn't have to ask for basic things. A good wife understands." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "A good wife? Raghav, you come home after midnight saying you've already eaten. I cook, you ignore it. I try to talk, you walk away. I clean your desk, you snap at me. How is that a marriage?" He moved past me, his hand brushing mine only long enough to remind me how cold he had become. He reached into the side pocket of his bag, pulled out a slim folder, and placed it on the bed. Inside were divorce papers. My breath caught. You already arranged all this?" "Yes," he said plainly. "Sign them. The house lease will be transferred. You can stay until the end of the month." I felt something collapse inside me, not just heartbreak, but a dawning understanding that this wasn't sudden at all. He hadn't outgrown the marriage overnight. He had been planning his exit step by step, while I kept trying to keep us together with hope that was dying by the day. He slung the bag over his shoulder. "I don't owe you anything more, Diya." "And after everything?" I whispered. "After 10 years?" He paused only long enough to deliver the final cut. "Don't make this dramatic. I've made my decision." The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt more final than any slam. I sank onto the bed, the papers trembling in my hands. 10 years of memories washed through me. Our wedding, our first home, the nights we once talked until sunrise. All of it now reduced to a folded document waiting for my signature. Outside, the evening azan drifted through the air, gentle and distant. It felt like a prayer for a life that was no longer mine. And as I sat there in a house, suddenly too quiet, too empty, too unfamiliar, I realized something with painful clarity. I had lost him long before he walked out of the door. I just hadn't accepted the burial. The night after Raghav left, the house felt stranger than ever. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same, but everything had shifted like the soul of the place had slipped out the door behind him. I walked through each room slowly, touching objects we once bought together, noticing how lifeless they suddenly felt. His absence wasn't quiet, it was deafening. I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the distant bark of stray dogs, wondering how a man could erase a decade of marriage with the ease of closing a suitcase. The shadows on the walls felt longer, heavier, as if they too were grieving what I had lost. The next morning, I forced myself to function. I showered, dressed, tied my hair neatly, and reached the office with mechanical steps. But my mind was racing in circles. Why had he hidden his resignation? Why Ahmedabad? Why the rush? Why divorce now? By afternoon, a storm began gathering inside me, the kind that comes not from anger, but from the sudden, dawning clarity that something far bigger was happening. I opened the divorce folder again during lunch break, scanning each page. Dates, signatures, instructions. Everything so methodically arranged, almost professional. Then one detail stopped me cold. His signature was dated 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before the anniversary, 2 weeks before he even pretended to celebrate. 2 weeks before I cooked his favorite meals, believing we were still a team, my stomach twisted. He had been planning this for months. I closed the folder and stared out the cafeteria window at the street below rickshaws, weaving between cars, a vendor shouting about fresh samosas, a schoolgirl running to catch her bus. Life moved on for everyone else. But I was stuck in a moment that refused to release me. When I returned home that evening, another blow was waiting. The building manager stopped me near the stairwell. Madam, Mr. Raghav submitted a request. He's terminating the lease at the end of the month. You will need to vacate. I felt the air leave my lungs. He didn't even speak to me about it, I said quietly. The manager lowered his gaze. I'm sorry, madam. He wrote that the person staying behind would clear out. The person staying behind, not his wife, not Diya, just someone left behind. I walked slowly up the stairs, every step echoing the truth more clearly. Raghav hadn't just left the marriage. He had removed me from his life with the precision of a man erasing a name from a list. Inside the apartment, I sat on the floor, letting the weight of everything press into my chest. And for the first time since he walked out, a strange, unsettling thought crept into my mind. A man who leaves like this doesn't leave for nothing. He leaves for someone, and whoever she was, I knew I was about to meet her. Not in person, but in truth. I spent the next 2 days moving through life like a ghost, working, speaking, breathing, yet feeling nothing. Every corner of my home reminded me of Raghav's absence, but something else had begun to grow inside me too. A need for answers, not closure, not forgiveness answers. On the third evening, as the sun dipped behind the pink sandstone buildings of Jaipur, a notification appeared on my phone. An email from Raghav. The subject line read only one word, proof. My pulse quickened. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The first image that loaded was a marriage certificate. Groom, Raghav Singh Goy. Bride, Ananya Rathore. Place of registration, Ahmedabad. Date, 1 day after our divorce had been finalized. 1 day. My breath caught in my throat. He hadn't wasted a moment, not even the courtesy of allowing the ink on our divorce papers to dry before beginning his new life. My hands felt cold, my skin tingled, but the shock didn't end there. A second image arrived. A wedding photo. Raghav stood beside a woman dressed in an embroidered ivory lehenga, her face glowing under layers of flawless makeup, her smile sharp and confident. She looked like the kind of woman magazines wrote articles about: elegant, poised, untouchable. My phone buzzed. Raghav was calling. I answered, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me needed to hear what kind of man he had become. Diya, he said, his voice brimming with triumph. I wanted you to see for yourself. I'm married now to someone who understands me, someone who isn't always busy, someone who cares. I said nothing. And her family. He paused, as if preparing to boast. They own the Rathore hotel chain. Her father gifted us a villa in Ahmedabad. I've been promoted to regional vice president. My life has changed. The message beneath his words was clear. You were never enough. Finally, I spoke. And you planned all this while you were still with me? He chuckled softly. Things happen when they are meant to. Besides, Ananya is everything a wife should be: graceful, supportive, traditional. Traditional? The irony almost made me laugh. Before I could respond, he continued. And there's more. She's pregnant. 3 months. 3 months. Meaning he had already begun his new life long before he ended ours. I ended the call. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just with the calmness of a woman who had finally seen the truth, not through his words, but through the hollow space he left behind. I sat there for a long time, staring at the photo, her smile, his hand on her waist, the stolen happiness they flaunted. But beneath all the glitter and celebration, something felt off. Something familiar in her face, not in the beauty she displayed, but in the way she held her smile, tight and calculated. A memory tugged at me, distant yet sharp. I had seen her before, not like this, not polished, not perfect, but in another lifetime. And suddenly, I knew where to look next. That night, long after the city lights dimmed and Jaipur slipped into its quiet midnight rhythm, I sat alone on the living room floor with my phone in my hand. The wedding photo of Raghav and Ananya stayed open on the screen, her perfect smile practically challenging me to look away. But I couldn't. Something in that face tugged at a string buried deep inside my memory. Ananya Rathore. Where had I heard that name before? Not in the newspapers, not in social circles, but somewhere closer, somewhere personal. I opened the photo again, zooming into her smile, the slight crookedness in her right canine tooth. My breath caught. That wasn't a flaw, it was a memory from school. Suddenly, a flash of an old classroom came back, sunlit windows, chalk dust floating in the air, giggles, whispered insults. A girl sitting alone in the corner, thin plaits, dull skin, acne scars, hiding behind her notebooks. A girl named Times, Ananya Mehta Times, back then, not Rathore. The crooked tooth, the downward gaze, the stiff smile she used whenever someone teased her. But this Ananya, this new version was sculpted, transformed, rebuilt, and that's when the truth struck. She hadn't just changed her life, she had rebuilt her entire identity. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and called the one person who would remember everything. Meera, my closest friend from school. She picked up on the second ring. Diya, are you okay? Do you remember a girl named Ananya from school? I asked, my voice tight. There was a brief pause, then a small gasp. Oh God, yes. Ananya Mehta, quiet, always bullied, had that allergy problem on her face. I swallowed. Do you have any pictures of her? Let me check. The minutes felt like hours until my phone finally buzzed with a message. I opened it, and there she was, a teenage girl with uneven features, sad eyes, and the exact crooked tooth. It was her, the same woman Raghav replaced me with, the same woman who now stood beside him in silk and diamonds. I stared at the before and after pictures side by side as if looking at two different universes. It wasn't just surgery, it was reinvention. Reinvention so seamless that even the world around her had accepted it. But reality doesn't disappear. Genes don't rewrite themselves. The past doesn't vanish, it simply hides. A shiver ran down my spine as the puzzle pieces shifted into place. Her perfect new face, her wealthy new family, her immaculate public image, and then the one detail Raghav had almost whispered earlier. She was 3 months pregnant. 3 months. Meaning she had started a new chapter with him long before he ended mine. But something else bothered me even more, something that had gnawed at me since Raghav mentioned the pregnancy. Why did he sound uneasy when he said it? Why did his voice tremble? And why did the wedding photo feel incomplete? Before I could unpack those thoughts, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. Diya, I know everything. Please call me. I froze. The number was from Ahmedabad, and I knew instinctively, painfully, who it belonged to. Raghav. But his message wasn't triumphant this time. It was trembling, desperate. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a certainty take shape. This story wasn't finished, not even close. And the next truth waiting for me would change everything. I didn't respond to Raghav's message immediately. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than grief or humiliation. I felt control, cold, steady, unfamiliar, but grounding. If he wanted to talk, he could wait. But the next morning, as the first light crept into my half-empty home, curiosity began stirring inside me. Not the kind that begged for reconciliation, but the kind that demanded explanations, answers, accountability. By afternoon, the phone rang again. Same number, same city. This time, I answered. Raghav's voice cracked the moment he heard mine. Diya, thank you for picking up. I didn't say anything. He inhaled shakily. She gave birth yesterday. For a second, everything inside me froze. Not because I cared about his new life, but because I knew instinctively that whatever came next would unravel the last thread he'd been clinging to. She won't hold the baby, he whispered. She looks at her and turns away. She says she's exhausted, but Diya, there's something wrong. Something wrong? 2 words, heavy with panic. I stayed silent, letting him speak. The baby doesn't look like either of us, he choked out. Not like her new face, not even like mine now. There it was, the truth creeping out from the cracks they both had tried so hard to seal. Maybe she takes after someone in the family, I said calmly. No, he snapped. Then softer. I thought that too. But Diya, remember when you laughed? When I told you she was pregnant? You knew something, didn't you? His desperation leaked through every syllable. I could almost see him standing in some glossy hospital corridor in Ahmedabad, surrounded by sterile white walls and the faint scent of antiseptic, holding a newborn who reflected a truth neither he nor Ananya wanted to face. And then I said it slowly, deliberately. Genes don't change, Raghav. Silence, thick, unavoidable. I continued. You can build a new life. You can change your job, your city, your marriage partner. She can change her face, her name, her identity. But the past doesn't disappear. It simply waits. His breath wavered. Diya, the baby has my old eyes. I closed my eyes. I didn't need a picture. I remembered his school photos, the uneven features, the insecurity he buried. The face he abandoned the moment he could afford to reshape it. And hers? I asked quietly. She has Ananya's original skin tone and her old jawline. He sounded broken, confused, terrified of a truth he had spent years pretending did not exist. Then he whispered, Ananya won't even look at the child. She wanted beauty, perfection. She says she can't raise a daughter who doesn't look like her. There it was, the real betrayal. Not mine, not his, hers. A woman who rebuilt herself only to reject the one person who inherited the paths she tried to erase. I let out a long, steady breath. Raghav, that little girl deserves love, not shame. If you can't give her that, you'll destroy her before she even learns to speak. He swallowed hard. What should I do? You figure it out, I said softly. For once in your life, take responsibility. And before he could respond, I ended the call. This time, without trembling, without hesitation, without grief. For the first time since he walked away, something in me felt alive again. Not because he needed me, but because I no longer needed him. After I ended the call, the silence in my home felt different. It no longer pressed on my chest. It no longer reminded me of what I had lost. Instead, it felt like space wide, still, and finally mine again. But peace didn't come overnight. The mind, after carrying years of hurt, doesn't heal just because the truth finally shows its face. That night, I lay awake, thinking not about Raghav's betrayal anymore, but about the child. A baby girl who entered the world only to be rejected by the very people who created her. A child punished for inheriting features her parents tried to erase. And for the first time since the divorce, my anger wasn't for myself. It was for her. The next few days passed in a strange blur. I packed slowly, sorting through memories as if they were fragile. Antiques, some I kept, most I discarded. Every item I touched made me realize how long I had been living like a shadow in my own home. Meanwhile, Raghav kept messaging, not with arrogance anymore, but with confusion, fear, and a desperation. He didn't know how to hide. He didn't beg me to come back, not once. But he asked question after question about the baby, about Ananya, about destiny, about shame. I answered none. One evening, as I was wrapping a set of silver bowls my mother had gifted me years ago, a message came that made me pause. Diya, she left the hospital. I frowned. Another message followed. She went home without the baby. My breath caught. I called him immediately, and he answered on the first ring. She left, he repeated, voice hollow. Her parents took her home. She told the doctor she can't bond with the child. She hasn't visited once since morning. I pressed my lips together. And you? I'm still here, he said quietly. The nurses are teaching me how to hold her, how to feed her. I'm trying, Diya. Those last two words lingered in the air. Times I'm trying, asterisk. Words he never once said to me in our 10 years. Something shifted inside me, not softness, not forgiveness, but clarity. Raghav, I said, that baby is innocent. If you don't protect her now, you will regret it for the rest of your life. He exhaled shakily. She cried when I held her today. But then she stopped. She looked at me like she recognized me. Because she did. Because blood remembers what pride tries to erase. What should I do? He asked again, voice breaking. Be her father, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. There was a long silence. Then he whispered, Diya, I never meant to hurt you this much. For a moment, I felt something like sorrow pass through me, not for him, but for the version of me who once would have believed those words. That doesn't matter anymore, I replied. We're not the same people we were. After the call ended, I sat by the window, watching the evening lights flicker over the rooftops of Jaipur. The world outside moved gently, peacefully, and for the first time, I felt aligned with it, no longer fighting, no longer clinging. Raghav's life was collapsing in the exact spots he had once mocked mine. Ananya's facade was cracking under the weight of a truth she had tried to surgically erase, and the child, helpless, unwanted, innocent, was the only one who deserved anything from this mess. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. What broke me no longer owned me. The final week before I moved out felt strangely calm, almost like the quiet that settles over a city just before monsoon clouds break open. I packed the last of my belongings with no hurry, no fear. Every item boxed away felt like a thread severed, releasing me from a life I had carried on my shoulders alone. But life has a way of testing you just when you believe you found balance again. 3 days before the lease ended, my phone buzzed with a call from Meera. Diya, have you checked the news? Her voice was tight. What news? Ahmedabad, the Rathore family. Something happened. My stomach clenched. After everything, I didn't want more chaos, but fate apparently wasn't finished revealing its pages. I opened the link she sent. A headline flashed across the screen. Asterisk, prominent business family faces internal strain after daughter leaves hospital without newborn. Asterisk. Another article followed. Asterisk. Sources claim emotional disconnect and postpartum complications. Asterisk. And then asterisk. Husband retains sole custody, temporarily child under medical observation. Asterisk. I closed my eyes. So it was public now. The perfect image, the flawless marriage, the fairy tale wedding, all unraveling under the weight of one truth they couldn't hide. That afternoon, Raghav called again. I let it ring twice before answering. Diya, they're blaming me, he whispered. Her parents, the media, everyone. Why? They think I pressured her. They think I caused the emotional breakdown. They don't care about the child, only their reputation. And Ananya, she refuses to speak to me. She says the baby ruined her life. Ruined. A word that cut deeper than any betrayal he had ever inflicted on me. I inhaled slowly. What do you believe, Raghav? He didn't answer immediately. And when he did, his voice trembled. I think the baby is the only honest thing in this whole mess. For once, he wasn't running from the truth. For once, he wasn't hiding behind pride. Then take care of her, I said softly. If you want redemption, start there. But Diya, he whispered, I don't know how to be a father. I closed my eyes. Memories of the man he used to be flickered through my mind. Not perfect, not heroic, but human. The boy who once dreamed big before ambition and insecurity twisted him. Before he chased beauty more than loyalty. No one knows how, I replied, but you learn, if you choose to. There was a long silence. Then he whispered, almost like a confession, she looks at me as if she's waiting, as if I am the only one she has. She is, I said. That evening, after the sun dipped behind Jaipur's pink skyline, I stepped out onto the terrace one last time. The same terrace where I had once hung fairy lights, cooked lal mas, and waited for a man who never came home. But tonight, I didn't feel the sting of abandonment. I felt release. I felt the closing of a chapter that had overstayed its welcome. And as the warm night breeze moved across my skin, something inside me softened not toward Raghav, not toward Ananya, but toward myself. I had survived a heartbreak carefully crafted to break me. I had walked through betrayal and found clarity instead of bitterness. I had faced the truth head on and came out whole. But fate had one last surprise waiting. Just as I turned to go inside, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, not Raghav's. Diya, I believe you know the truth. Please meet me. Attached was a location in Ahmedabad. My breath caught. The sender's name was simple, Ananya. I stared at the message for a long time. The glowing screen reflecting off the quiet walls of my almost empty apartment. Of all the people I expected to hear from, Ananya was the last. The woman who replaced me. The woman who rebuilt herself. The woman who rejected her own child. But something inside me knew I had to go. Not for her, not for Raghav. For closure, for answers, for myself. The following morning, I boarded a bus to Ahmedabad. The 5-hour journey stretched endlessly across dry plains and scattered villages, each passing mile peeling another layer of bitterness off my chest. By the time the city skyline emerged, sleek, modern, ambitious, I felt strangely steady. Ananya had chosen a small cafe near the old city. When I walked in, she was already there, seated by the window. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different from the wedding photos, but because she looked human, tired, fragile. Her makeup was minimal, her hair undone, her eyes shadowed with something deeper than exhaustion. She stood when she saw me. Diya, she whispered, almost afraid of the name. I sat opposite her. The silence hovered between us like a storm cloud waiting to break. Finally, she spoke. You know who I was. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied. She swallowed. I thought I buried that girl. I thought if I changed everything, no one would ever see her again. But your daughter did, I said softly. Her lips trembled. When they placed her in my arms, I froze. Not because she wasn't beautiful, but because she looked like the person I've spent my entire life running away from. I felt exposed, as if the world could suddenly see the truth. I didn't interrupt. She needed to say it herself. I loved Raghav, she continued, voice shaking. Or maybe I loved the version of myself I could be with him. Elegant, desired, important. But when I saw her, all the surgeries, all the money, all the new identities, none of it mattered. I was still that girl underneath. And instead of loving her, I said quietly, you punished her for it. She closed her eyes as tears slipped down her cheeks. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I didn't leave her because I hate her. I left because I hated myself. For the first time, I felt something unexpected pity. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, but pity for a woman who was at war with her own reflection. Raghav is trying, I said. He's learning to care for her. Her gaze flickered. He sent me a message, a picture. She was sleeping on his chest. A pause. She looks peaceful with him, safe. She deserves that, I said. A long silence settled between us. Then Ananya reached into her bag and slid a small envelope across the table. These are my medical reports, my therapist's notes. I'm getting help. Slowly, she swallowed. I'm not asking for redemption. I just wanted someone to know the truth. I didn't touch the envelope. Why me? Because, she whispered, you're the only person who sees things clearly. You saw him for who he was long before I did, and you saw me even when I didn't want to be seen. The cafe bell chimed as new customers entered. Outside, the city moved with the noise of traffic and life, indifferent to the quiet confession unfolding inside. Ananya stood. Take care of yourself, Diya. You deserved more than what he gave you, more than what life gave you. I watched her walk away, elegant yet wounded, confident yet breaking. And as I sat there, sunlight spilling across the table, I realized something profound. Sometimes the person who destroys you and the person who teaches you to rebuild can be the same person, just in different skins. I gathered my things, stepped out into the warm Ahmedabad air, and for the first time in years, I felt a chapter closing gently, not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. Whatever awaited me next would finally belong only to me. When I returned to Jaipur, the city felt different, lighter, as if the weight I had carried for years had finally slipped from my shoulders. I unpacked in my new apartment, a small place with sunlight spilling through every window, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed without pain. I didn't check the news again. I didn't follow Raghav's life or Ananya's struggle. Their story had taken its own path, and mine no longer ran alongside theirs. But sometimes, as I made tea in the quiet mornings, I thought of the baby girl, her tiny fingers, her old soul's eyes. I hoped she would grow up knowing love, not expectations, truth, not shame. One evening, standing on my balcony, I whispered to myself, what broke me made room for who I was meant to become. And in that moment, I finally felt free.